Welcome to Rubin on Point, a podcast about cancer, resilience, and being human. I'm Dr. Dan Rubin, and together we'll uncover the true power of resilience, the strength to recover, adapt, and thrive through life's toughest challenges. Each episode will bring bold ideas, transformative practices, and inspiring stories that redefine what health, healing, and what the human spirit can achieve. And you're going to meet some really cool people along the way. If you're ready to turn obstacles into opportunities and live with greater purpose and courage, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Your journey to resilience begins now. Welcome to the Rubin on Point podcast. I'm Dr. Dan Rubin, and on this podcast, we talk a lot about cancer, quite a bit about resilience, and most of all, about being human. Joining me today is somebody very special to me and very special to many people in the world, Rachel Bair.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Oh my God. Thank you for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
You are amazing. You have an amazing story. And I've chatted with you before. We've shared time in Cancun, which we'll talk about. We've shared time in this office. You are amazing because you made some decisions, very important decisions about your life.
Yeah.
And when was it that we first got to know each other?
2019.
And what happened in 2019?
2019, I was diagnosed with early stage breast cancer. I was 36 years old, on top of the world, executive at a software company, raising my kids, and there was a lump. Didn't turn my entire world inside out and upside down and shook it on its head, and that is when we met.
What was going on in your life at that time besides that? Think like personal, like were you sleeping, were you exercising?
No, I was a mess. But I didn't know that I was a mess, right? I think when you're young like that and you're in the middle of the big life, right? I have kids and they're in soccer and they're at school and I'm having fun and I'm strong and I'm healthy and I'm a boss, right? I'm doing all the things and I'm taking care of my kids and I've got this software development company and we're, a startup, and so we're working 80 hours a week. And I had been taking care of my grandparents. So I had lived with my grandparents when I was young, and then of course, because they were my grandparents, they were in their 90s, and my grandfather had lymphoma. And so I helped to take care of him the last couple of years of his life. And then when he passed, my grandmother came to live with us. And
was that stressful?
Oh my gosh, it was crazy stressful because we were very, very close. I lived with them through high school and much of my childhood. And so they were very parental type. Grandparental figures, right? And
it was hard to see them get older quicker than your parents would then.
Oh my gosh, yes. And they lived wonderful lives, and everybody will say that when somebody dies, oh, they had a good life, and it's like, well, they did, but that does not change the impact of my grief. Right? Grief is grief. Whether somebody is 96 or 46, you're going to grieve when they're gone.
And this was around 2019?
So my grandmother died in January of 2018 after I had her here for 2 years, and she lived in our house for a while. And then my twins were 9, and it was just that.
Twins is not easy.
I don't have
twins, but my sister does, and I know a little bit about it.
Kids are not easy.
Kids are not easy.
Working mom life is not easy.
Wow. Being a wife's not easy.
Being a wife none of it is easy, but all of it, if done right, is incredibly worthwhile.
And then all of a sudden you had another label.
And then I was a cancer patient. And that becomes your identity.
Yeah.
Everything revolves around that. And so we felt at the time that we were very blessed that it was just stage 1 cancer, right? It was not in my lymph nodes. We did the typical. We did surgery, opted for a lumpectomy. It was a small tumor, 15 millimeters, right? So
got it out.
Lima bean-ish size, right? No big deal, no lymph node invasion. All the lymph nodes they took in surgery were negative for cancer. We did radiation after you and I talked about that. That was when I met you. I was like, do I do this? Is it worth it? Is it, and you were like, yep, absolutely. So
what kind of radiation did you do?
I did interstitial radiation. So it's internal. They place catheters throughout the breast around the tumor bed. And we chose that because it was half the dose of radiation that traditional radiation would give you.
And very
Very
localized.
localized.
Very intentional.
Much less chance of heart problems after, lung problems after, especially on the, being on the left side. So we did our radiation.
So it wasn't the typical radiation that a lot of people get. Usually if they have a bigger lesion or if they have lymph nodes, and then they may get 15 or sometimes 30 treatments, and that really takes a toll. This was just quick. Was it 5 days?
5 days.
Yep.
5 days. So the procedure to place the catheters was probably the worst part.
Okay.
It's not a good time to have 17 holes poked in your breast.
Looking back, would you do the radiation back if you, not looking forward, but like, are you happy with your decision?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because even what comes later, I never had a local recurrence.
Got it.
And we didn't have the skin side effects and a lot of the other side effects that radiation can give.
Quickly went right back to your
yeah, and the doctor that did it was fantastic. His team was wonderful.
Awesome.
So yeah, it was. I think the hardest part of my first bout of cancer was the radiation, because it was kind of, surgery is kind of easy. You go, surgery, you're done. You don't see those people again. You see your surgeon maybe once or twice for a follow-up. I know surgery was always the easy part to me. Radiation, I think, was the first time I felt like a cancer patient.
Because why?
Just going every day, sitting in that waiting room that everybody there has cancer. It was just very real. It became very real that you have a much bigger problem than that little surgery made you. The surgery, a lumpectomy, it's not weeks of recovery. It's one of the easier surgeries that I've had.
Yeah, it wasn't a big surgery.
Wasn't a big
It
surgery.
was like an area that heals well, and I get it. I mean, I know what you mean about feeling like a person with cancer. You might get in an elevator and go up, and everybody's say going to the 3rd floor. And that's the cancer floor. Mm-hmm. So
That's the cancer. Well, and everybody looks at you different when they know you're sick, right?
Who's everybody?
Doctors. The way doctors talk to you is different once you have cancer. People, in your life that are, acquaintances or that work with you, like once
Because they don't understand.
Once the C word comes out, everybody just looks at you like, so you're probably going to die, right?
And you made a decision to what? Not.
I have always looked at my diagnosis as a temporary inconvenience that we had to overcome.
That's resilience.
That's resilience. I have never accepted it. There is a descent into chronicity that comes with acceptance of failure, and I refuse that.
Wait, you said what? You never accepted what? Failure or the diagnosis?
I accepted the diagnosis. Cancer is cancer.
Yeah,
but
I have it.
Dying from it was never an option.
Well said.
That was just not going to be the way my story played out.
That gives me chills. I've heard you say that several times, and I still get that good endorphin feeling when you say it. But when it comes from you, it's different.
You have to decide.
Yeah.
There's a decision that takes place on how am I going to come out the other side of this? And I used to ask all my doctors, you included, what's the side effects from that? What's the side effect? What happens if I take this long term? And some of my oncologists that I had in the beginning would kind of give you that look like, well, what do you care? Because you'll be dead if you don't do this. And it was like, no, I won't be. So what's the side effects? How might this impact me later in life?
Yeah.
And
what was it like for you to make that decision? Because I think there's a lot of people watching this, hearing you say that, I decided not to die. Dying was never an option from this. It just wasn't. So is that what first came to you?
That was a journey in and of itself. So, and that came much more from my second bout of cancer than my first. The first one was stage 1, easily survivable. You
didn't need to make a decision.
I didn't need to make a decision. That decision was more about how healthy will I come through this? Why did I get sick in the first place?
And you knew why you did.
I figured it out pretty quick, right? Stressful life, terrible diet, not taking care of myself, not exercising, not working out, not sleeping. Well, how long can you be healthy when you live that way? So that, I think, was more about understanding the human body as an animal entity.
And looking at the limits of resilience when you're not
Yeah.
allowing for healthy resilience.
Yeah, I think you said it to me. You don't put sugar in your gas tank, do you? So if you're not giving the body what it physically needs to thrive, how do you expect it to thrive? It's a fairly logical argument that you can make. And cancer is just nature's way of showing you we don't have what we need. So
The body requires certain things.
Yeah.
It requires sleep and
nutrients and
nature and good interpersonal relationships and
100%.
sunlight. Yeah.
Sunlight and outdoors and joy.
Yeah.
Life requires joy. And if you are so stressed out that none of the joy can come to the surface, or you don't even feel it anymore, you're going to get sick.
Which is really interesting because our first episode that launched when we talked to another patient of ours, Ms. Kramer, that was a central tenet of her life, of her writings, and of her wellness, and her resilience is happiness.
Joy. It's a choice.
Yeah.
You have to choose to see it. You have to choose to feel it. You have to choose it every day when you wake up. It's a choice. And I thought...
Right. You get to choose how you act upon or react to something.
Absolutely.
That may be said to you, or news that you see, or because things happen in life.
Every day. Yeah. And it's little things some days, or big things, or some days it's a big thing that you choose to look at as a little thing. Or some days it's a little thing that you choose to look at as a big thing. Your car breaks today. Is that the worst thing that happened today? Or are you blessed enough to have a job and an income and to have a car?
Yeah.
Right? How do you look at it? So I think that first round of cancer really taught me those things.
Okay.
Right? Find joy, be present. Those things that you hear a lot of cancer patients talk about.
Yeah.
The second round taught me resilience, and resilience in the face of impossibility.
Somebody said it would be impossible?
Well, they told me. So last January, I fell in a parking lot.
So January of what?
2024.
Okay.
So I was 2 months away from celebrating my 5-year cancer-free.
2 months.
2 months. We were elated. We were finally going to be able to kind of go back to normal, right? Not so many oncology appointments, not so much worry, not so much what's going to happen. And I tripped over my heel in a parking lot and fell. And we thought maybe I broke my femur, maybe I tore my hamstring. The pain was just really bad. So we go to the emergency room at Mayo, and after about an 8-hour visit, they were like, well, you didn't do either of those things, but your bones are riddled with cancer. And it was such an unbelievably crushing blow, right? 2 months away.
You're happy, you're like, okay, I fell, this sucks.
Yeah.
And something sucked even more than that.
Yeah, and it was funny. I think subconsciously I probably knew I was sick again, because I remember waiting in that waiting room and praying, God, please just let it be something curable. Please just don't let it be something permanent, right? Please just let this be. And I had, retrospectively, I had a lot of pain in my back and in my shoulders and in my hips that I thought was just desk job pain, right? I'm in my 40s now.
Were you back to doing your stuff?
Oh yeah, I was hiking and yogaing and working out, and
We didn't see you for a while.
Yeah, I was doing great.
Yeah.
Blood work was great.
No, but were you back to your older habits is what I mean.
Probably not as clean of a diet, but I was much more cognizant of get outside, work out. I had taken a job that was far less stressful. So we definitely made some permanent changes, but I think diet is probably where I struggle the most. Just living a busy life and trying to eat clean takes time.
Yeah. Well, you have to think about what you're going to make. Then you have to have the supplies. You have to go get them. Then you have to make it.
Yep.
Then eating it is the smallest part.
Right.
Then you got to clean it.
And it's that part, right? I have to think about it. I got to go on Saturday or Sunday to the grocery store in between the soccer games, right? Then I got to find the organic stuff, and they were out, and now I got to go to 2 stores or 3. So, and I have teenagers that don't want to eat, steamed vegetables or, this grain-free pasta that mom found. They're like, can we just eat normal food?
Yeah, Mom, can't we eat normal food?
Can't we eat normal food?
I think about this a lot. And I think about, okay, what do animals do? They sleep, and then they walk around looking for food. and then they're with each other, but some are alone, right? I mean, there's a coyote running around Scottsdale. What is it doing? It's not like
looking for food.
It's looking for food.
So
That's what it's surviving. And what did we do before we even had structures that we built? You know, if humans were living in caves, whatever the history tells us, we would look for food and then do something, and then eventually we built houses. And now there's so much more to do that food has become like I'll just go through a drive-through.
Yeah, well, and there's so much prepackaged food. It's so easy. We've become so inherently lazy when it comes to food because we don't have to look for food.
Oh boy, if we start talking about this,
well, we'll go down the rabbit hole for hours. But what I found was I was listening to actually a podcast, and I can't remember the name of the gentleman, but it has sat with me for a really long time in this cancer journey of what is discipline. And we tend to think that discipline is strength, it's willpower.
Yeah.
And what he said that really stuck with me is it is the ability to prioritize your future self over your present self.
Let's say that one more time.
Your ability to prioritize your future self over the present self. The present self wants a donut. Future self's going to have to go work that off in the gym. Right? Or present self wants whatever it is that maybe isn't best for you.
I want to stay up late and binge watch my TV show.
Absolutely. But tomorrow's Dr. Rubin's going to pay for that because you're going to be exhausted, right? Or you're not going to feel good. And so looking at it as a prioritization of my future self has really helped me not struggle as hard with making the right choices, because I'm like, oh, well, tomorrow's Rachel will be cancer-free and today's Rachel's going to get her there. Right? Instead of, I really want that ice cream, or I'm going to stay up late and not sleep.
It's interesting you say that about today's Rachel's going to get her there, because I was at Vincere Cancer Center this morning for a meeting, and I've been there a lot of times, but they have this one beautiful large painting there, and it says, there are only 2 days when you can't do anything or perform anything, and they're named yesterday and tomorrow. And I forgot who said it. I don't remember. Mike Einstein maybe, but it was a famous quote. And so it's interesting that you say, and today's Rachel's gonna, because that's the day that you can do
that's
something.
the day that you have, right? So how do I make these right choices? I think about that girl tomorrow that wants to be healthy, that wants that cancer-free scan, that wants to watch her children grow, that wants to see her grandchildren.
Who doesn't even want the scan anymore.
I don't want to scan. I don't want to, I hope my next PET scan's my last one, right? And so that prioritization of the future self instead of the punishment of the future self. Because that's kind of what bad choices are today, right? It's basically procrastination of tomorrow's me is going to pay the price for today's decision, whether that's weight gain or illness or a loss of a job because I didn't get my work done today, right? So that kind of procrastination is basically punishing of yourself at a future time. And I was like, well, that's just silly. Why would I do that?
And so when did you hear that podcast about when in your journey?
It's been several months ago now. And it was really, I think when you get diagnosed with anything that's terminal, so obviously January's cancer was stage 4.
You said you got diagnosed with something that's terminal. That's not in your decision pod. The word terminal.
No.
Somebody else says it's terminal.
They said it was, it will become terminal. Science says it's terminal. There's no cure for what I have. And there are some tools that we can give you, drugs and treatments that could extend your life a bit. But this will be extend your life a bit. I'm like, what does that mean? And so I went to the hospital and we were diagnosed with lots of cancer all through the head, neck, spine.
Was it only in your bones?
Only in my bones.
Why do you think the bones? I have philosophy about that. So often I see that when cancer is in the bones and bones only, metastatic disease, it has something to do with the structure of people's lives, which is...
It's interesting.
Yeah, because it's the structure of the body, and I think the body's telling us something.
That's really, I don't know. I've never really thought about it much. I was always just grateful it wasn't shutting down my organs.
So then you got that news.
So I got that news and we went to the doctors. That's what you do, right? Now, where do we go from here? And
because they said we could give you some drugs that would extend your life and maybe not make you feel so good or
and
drop your white blood cell count.
I'll never forget it. I was sitting with my husband and my father in the oncologist office at Mayo Clinic. And I said, I need you to explain this to me, this disease. And he was like, well, it's estrogen positive breast cancer, and we see it go to the bones, the brain, the liver, and the lungs typically. Yours is in the bones. And I was like, I understand that part.
But I want you to explain it.
I want to know how I die. And everybody got real quiet, and my father was irate because obviously he didn't even want that thought in my head. And I said, you're going to explain to me how I die of this disease because I need to understand the mechanism of it. And the oncologist kind of hemmed and hawed and wouldn't really explain it to me. And I said, no, you don't die of bone cancer. It sucks and it's super painful, but you don't die from it. So how do you die? And I've always needed to be able to deconstruct something to come to my own conclusions. That's just how my mind works. And he basically hemmed and hawed for about 10 minutes and then basically said, well, eventually it will find its way out of your bones and you will die the way all cancer patients do, of widespread metastatic disease through your organs. And I knew from my first bout of cancer that that's not a pretty death. I had researched that. And I know a lot of people don't like to talk about things like that. But for me, I needed to understand it to say no to it.
That's beautiful.
Right? So it was like, I will not let this spread outside of my bones. I will do everything that it takes. And that was when the journey really began for me, was, okay, this is what science says. This is what American doctoring says.
And that's after you had another surgery.
Yeah, so they told me that the bones in my hips and legs were so weak that I wouldn't be able to get treatment.
Why were they weak?
From the cancer eating holes in them.
Okay.
And that I wouldn't, if I fell and broke something, that I would not be able to continue on to get treatment, and that would basically speed along my demise. And so they put hip pins in, which are metal rods that go through the hips and then down into the femurs. Probably the most excruciatingly painful thing I've ever been through.
What, after you woke up and realized that
they did each surgery a day apart. The doctors admitted that they didn't take into account my young age. Typically that surgery is for people in their 60s or 70s with osteoporosis or things like that. And as you age, you create a canal in the bone.
Right, so it allows for the rods to be placed.
I did not have a canal.
Because you had younger bone.
Because I had younger bone, and my legs were strong. And so they drilled out the entirety of both of my femurs in a 48-hour period, which was basically the equivalent of breaking them. So we had a 16-day hospital stay for that to get the pain under control. But yeah, I mean, I went in.
What do you mean under control?
The pain was so excruciating they couldn't send me home.
Right. What I mean by under control is there's a limit to how much it can be controlled for you.
It was awful. I mean, I won't lie. Like I've had a C-section. I've been through in vitro. Multiple times I've had internal radiation, and this was by far the most painful thing I have ever been through. We left the hospital 25 pounds lighter in a wheelchair.
25 pounds
25
lighter?
pounds lighter.
Well, not because they took bone from you, because they put rods back in, but that was vital weight.
Vital weight.
Lean mass that
came out. I actually cried when I came home because I thought I looked like a skeleton.
Had you cried before that?
I cried in the hospital. I was so taken off guard by the second diagnosis. I went every 6 months for my scans. I wasn't like I didn't go or missed my appointments, right? I did all the things a good cancer patient does. I had a naturopathic oncologist. I had a regular oncologist. Every 6 months, I had a mammogram. I won't get started on the idiocy of the insurance system, but we had begged for a PET scan at the third year, and were denied because I didn't have enough symptoms. So yeah, there was definitely moments of just utter despair, basically, of what is going to happen to me. My children spent their 15th birthday in my hospital room. Yeah. You know, so that was really hard to watch, you know, your kids watch their mom be sick again. Yeah. And I laid in that hospital bed and I made a promise to God that if he saved me, I would tell the world what he did.
Here you are.
And here I am. And I didn't know, and I told him, I don't care how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not looking for a miracle. I mean, I am looking for a miracle, but it doesn't have to be a miraculous, like spontaneous remission. I just will not die of this. And that was kind of my intent. So then I had that meeting with that oncologist when we left the hospital. And I went home and I started looking for absolutely every stage 4 cancer survivor that I could find. And I don't mean survivor, I've lived with it for 10 years or 15 years. I mean, it's gone.
Like gone.
Gone. I am in remission. I have been in remission. I have stayed in remission. Mm-hmm. Whether it was miraculously in some sort of a spiritual way, whether it was all naturopathic, whether it was
just whatever
treatment,
it was.
I don't care. I just absolutely immersed myself in every stage 4 cancer patient that I could find online that survived and got rid of the cancer. Because I did not want to, even if I can have 20 years, I don't want to have 20 sick years. I want to have 20 years. Mm-hmm. And that was what my world became. Was nothing but survivor stories. If somebody didn't make it, if somebody had negativity, that was not.
So once again, your world was centered around your diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. How do we beat this?
Yeah.
How do we win?
This is part of you. So philosophically, I mean, you think about it, it's wanting little parts of your body to die while making the rest of your body healthy.
I laid with my husband one night in bed because I wouldn't cry in front of my kids. And I sobbed for like 3 hours it was after our appointment with the oncologist, and realizing that they didn't have anything for me that would even guarantee time, because it's with breast cancer, and I'm sure any cancer, but breast cancer specifically, it's all about how you respond to the hormones. That's really what they have for you, is we're going to turn the estrogen off, which is going to make you menopausal and old before your time, but that's okay because you're not dead. And hopefully you'll get 18 to 24 months per cocktail, and we've got like 3 or 4 of them. And I just started doing that math, and I just sobbed, because it was like, I'm going to have what doesn't look like a great 4 to 5 years if I'm lucky. The next month, we found out I had a massive tumor in my skull, and now that 4 to 5 years might not be 4 to 5 years, because that was something they had missed in the initial diagnosis. And so things kind of went from bad to almost worse, right? It was like,
Still in your bone, but it was
still
just
in
in a more precarious location.
Sitting on my brain, pushing on it, right? So that was really scary, and, it was just like, but again, the best of the worst, I suppose. Mm-hmm. In my head, not so good, but not in my brain, very good, right? So like being like, okay, we can beat this too.
So you're on the internet scouring it.
Scouring.
This is your job?
This is my job.
Okay.
This is my job, is to survive, and we're going to figure out how to do it, because it's been done.
At this time? What are they, like, Mom, did you make dinner? Mom, what are you doing? Why are you always on your computer?
I didn't, physically I couldn't really walk. So I just sat on the computer all day long. The kids, it was a rough go. I think the kids, I was definitely very checked out in the research but I justified it by, how do we survive? Yeah. They'll understand if I'm still here in 20 years that the couple months I was checked out. And I am talking obscure stuff, and I would read a blog post about somebody that survived, and then I would read all 400 comments.
Wow.
Right? To see, did somebody else in this blog post survive, or did they try this treatment and it didn't work for them, and if it didn't work for them, why not? And that would lead me, just hours of commentary, but it was the journey I needed to go on, because that was how I found what I believe will ultimately save me, and what I hope are many others.
And then how did you find that, and what is it? And that's the next part of the story, which is amazing.
So I'm going to sound a little crazy, because it starts with a dog dewormer.
Okay.
So at this time, I found a protocol called fenbendazole. I know you've heard of it. I don't think you're a fan of it, but I know that you've heard of it. And it's all over the internet, the Joe Tippins protocol. Fenbendazole is a dog dewormer. There is a human version. You can't get it in the U.S.
We're not fans of it. It's not available for prescription by licensed practitioners in the United States. And trying to figure out if it does work. Many of my patients are on it. Many. But right, so you find fenbendazole.
So I find fenbendazole, and I'm like, well, what do I have to lose, right? Like, I've got something terminal. They don't have. I'm going to do what modern medicine has, but they don't have a lot. And there's people that are, one story after another are coming up of people that are cured with this. So I joined the Facebook group, and I joined.
Had you been on Facebook groups before? No. Wasn't your style?
No.
Yeah.
A lot of whining. Doesn't go with my survival tactic. So I joined the Fenbendazole for Cancer Facebook group, and there's a social media site called Substack that has a Cured by Fenbendazole blogger, and so I joined all this stuff. And I realized that one of the side effects of fenbendazole is tanking your liver, and I was like, well, that can't be good. We need a strong liver. We're fighting cancer, right? So I start diving down the rabbit hole on how do you dose this stuff without tanking your liver, which, by the way, I did tank my liver, so I didn't succeed there. But I found a website called the Healing Navigators, and they're really just...
Heal Navigator.
Heal Navigator. And they're just kind of a nursing promotional website for alternative treatments. And I had started going in to look at all the Mexican clinics, Hope for Cancer, and a couple of different American doctors that work in Tijuana that have different immunotherapies. And because I kind of thought to myself, we have to couple everything together. This has to be emotional, mental, physical, and science, right? Like I have to blend this together, and the fenbendazole was a sciencey thing, right? It destroys microtubules in cells, and cancer cells have microtubules, and they perform similarly, so that made sense to me. And then I came across a company by the name of Immunosine, and they made a custom cancer vaccine. And I became instantly obsessed because it made so much sense, and we've always struggled in modern medicine with how do we get the immune system to see cancer. If the immune system could see cancer the way it sees a virus, none of us would die of cancer.
I mean, it remains your first and last defense against cancer in somebody's body.
Always. And the body wants to heal.
It does.
The body wants to heal itself, right? It's intrinsic to its nature to heal. So when I came across Immunosine, I was so excited. And of course, I bring it my husband first. I'm like, look what I found. Yeah. And he's like, seems too good to be true. And I was like, shh, it's not. And so, of course, I immediately sent it off to my sister-in-law, who's very, very smart and can read sciencey documents, and my father, who's very, very smart. And I'm like, what do you guys think? And then I ran rampant on their website, right? Every video they had, and I went to their doctor's website and I read all their science, and then I brought it to you because I was like, okay, before I go and get over, and I filled out their forms to see if I was a candidate, right? Of course. And then I brought it to you because the cool thing about you is all the sides of cancer, right? You have to know all the traditional medicines and how they impact all the naturopathic things that you can do, and you understand the cells and the cellular structure almost better than even my radiation oncologist or typical oncologist because they just stay in their lane. So I ended up bringing it to you, and I was like, will you vet this, right? And
I remember.
I was so excited. And then because I had, at that point, they had told me we had gone through all of their paperwork, as this is all kind of happening simultaneously, that as long as we had the tumor in my head radiated because of something called pseudoprogression, I was a candidate. So it was like, not only is there now real scientific possibility, I can do it, right? And so I went to Vincere, and we had 40 radiation treatments to the head. I did not handle that well. That was. But
it set the stage for you to be able to be a good candidate to get the immunotherapy.
Yeah.
Sometimes cancer, the word vaccine has a negative connotation for people who don't necessarily know, because some people think a cancer vaccine is to prevent cancer. They're like, I don't want to put something in my body that, I don't need. But you're talking about a vaccine in the form of an autologous or made from self immunotherapy.
Yeah.
But what I remember is you saying, not only will you vet this for me, and I'm saying, yeah. I'm like, where did you even find this? You're saying, by the way, the CEO said that he would have a conversation with you, and I set it up.
Yes.
And I'm like, you did? Wait, the CEO is going to talk to me?
Yep.
And that was just one of the most wonderful things that's happened in my almost 30-year career.
It was such an amazing, to meet them. And of course, I am my typical pain in the butt self of I have 7,000 questions and you're going to answer all of them.
And they do.
And they do. And
they don't just answer them, they like answer them.
well, and what I
Like they
loved
take
about
pride in
them
it.
was they didn't give me answers that I would love. They weren't selling me something. A lot of the other Mexican clinics I had talked to, they're selling you, and I'm in sales, and so I know what I'm being sold.
Oh,
and
you're Rachel Bair, yeah.
yeah, don't sell me.
Yeah.
And so Immunosine was the only one that gave me true statistics. When I said, what's your response rate? What's your remission rate? They gave me real statistics. Everybody else was like, well, that's really hard to say. I'm like, you have a cancer clinic. Why is that hard to say?
Yeah, and it's been around for a long time.
And you've been around for 30 years. You can't tell me how many of your patients survive
And
more
it's
than
not
5
really,
years.
Like, some of those clinics aren't just adjuvant. People are going there because that's what they want as their main treatment. Which is
Well,
a problem,
yeah,
because statistically, it'd be different. It was like, okay, yeah, we've treated a lot of people with breast cancer, but we're always doing it in conjunction with conventional therapy. So it's like, well, what then does work? But I hear you. Immunosine gave you statistics they had.
These are the statistics that we have. This is how it works. And using my own cancer to unmask it to the immune system was the most logical thing to me. And logic for me always builds stamina and strength in the fight. If you're doing something logical, you can stick with it, right? You're like, my brain comprehends this, I understand this.
To you?
Well, we were taking my cancer.
Like a piece of your...
We were taking the disease that is harming me, and we're unmasking it to my own immune system.
Which is what happens with normal biophysiology.
Of course, right?
Happens in the body normally.
I had COVID in 2020. Why didn't I get it again? Because my immune system sees it, killed it, it's dead.
Natural immunity.
Natural immunity. So if I could create a natural immunity that would be forever remembered to this cancer, well, now that takes the other horrifying part of cancer away, which is the wait and see for years if I get sick again.
When did your husband acquiesce?
After you talk to them.
Got it.
And we talked to my regular oncologist. So I brought it to you and I brought it to her. And it just worked out. It was really cool. I brought it to Vincere because I was going through radiation at the time for palliative radiation for pain. And I was like, hey, what do you think of this? And she's pretty forward thinking.
She's amazing.
And she had a relative that had gone there because she said, are you going to Tijuana or are you going to Cancun? I said, I'm going to Cancun. And she looked at me and she said, if I were your age and I had children your children's ages, it's exactly what I would be doing.
Wow.
And I said, and I was surprised by that because typically regular doctors kind of poo-poo anything that's not modern, not approved or not a
on the guidelines.
on the guidelines that they practice, right? And so she said, I had a relative that went there. She had stage 4 ovarian cancer. Well, most people know that that's typically a death sentence. And I said, how is she doing? Right? Because you hope is a dangerous thing. You gotta have it, but you gotta have it in the right place. And she said, well, she didn't come home cancer-free. And I thought, well, that jibes. They tell you don't come home cancer-free. The body takes time to fight. But she's cancer-free today and has been.
Well,
that's a pretty amazing thing, right?
So then you had to travel to Cancun so the team there could get a piece of your cancer.
So we went to Cancun. Bone tumors are hard to get pieces of because they're holes, not masses, right? And so we went to Cancun and met the team in person. They were amazing. Got the biopsy and then came home and finished radiation.
And you had to do the radiation because you mentioned something called pseudoprogression, which is what?
So with this treatment, when you create an immune response, you create inflammation. That's what an immune response is, as you know, right? And so when you create inflammation around an existing mass, it gets bigger.
Yeah.
And they can expand up to 50%. And so for the one that was in my skull, they were like, if this one expands 50%, it could push so far onto your brain that you could have a brain hemorrhage and you could die.
Yeah. Part of that inflammation is also the incoming white blood cells
Absolutely.
that then take up the space too. So it's good inflammation.
It's great inflammation,
Yeah.
and you want it, which is weird because we always want to get rid of inflammation.
Right. It is a natural part of day-to-day stuff.
Sometimes I wonder if we let inflammation just do its thing, how much faster we would heal.
Well, it's an interesting point because there is a lot of sales of NSAIDs and anti-inflammatories when some of the ways, yes, inflammation is part of our housekeeping and part
absolutely.
of the custodialness of our immune system and our tissues. So you finished the radiation.
So finished radiation, and we went for treatment.
Yeah.
And the treatment is so easy. I think it was funny. We were expecting kind of more of an American experience, right? Where like, here I go, and if we go for, I get a bone drug to help the bones be stronger, right? And that's all day. You're in the clinic, you're at the IV, you're tired when you get home. It's kind of depressing just because you're there with all the other cancer patients getting their chemo, and again, it's one of those real cancer patient moments. This was like we're on the beach. They would come in the morning and they would do a blood test, and then you were done for the day, and you're like, we're just going to go to the beach, huh? Okay, we're going to go to the beach.
Right, because you have to wait. You had to get the blood draw to do what?
So they check all kinds of things. So you go in and you get a CT, and they kind of map where is the cancer today, what do you have. Then you get blood draws, and they look at different immune levels, and
They do a pretty
it's a pretty extensive workup that you get. And then you have to wait for that to come back, and then they have to process the cells that they get. They have to
make the immunotherapy.
they have to make the immunotherapy, right?
It takes about 8 days.
It takes about 8 days, and you're getting a drug in the meantime that's boosting your white blood cell count so that you can have more, they have more cells to work with, but it's just a quick shot, and then you're done, and you're like going back to the beach.
Oh, you mean the white
new
blood cell?
Neupogen, the white blood cell.
Yeah.
So even
Right,
though it
that's
takes
like for the first 3 days or so, you're getting
so even though that's 3 days of treatment. It's not treatment, right?
But they came to you to
They
do it.
come to you, you get a shot in your hotel room, and then you're like, should we go get coffee? Like, what do we do now?
It's a good experience.
Well, it was just the antithesis of cancer treatment in the U.S., which is kind of like, oh, we're going to be at the hospital all day, or oh, we're going to be in clinic all day, or oh, I'm dreading tomorrow because we're going to be in the waiting room. It was like, they come to you, you get your blood draw, you get your injection, and then you're like, well, what will we do with the rest of the day?
They're like, you're treating the body how it should be. You're going to go smell ocean air.
And that's what we did. We would, we would go sightsee, or we would go, and so the treatment itself was, you almost feel like you're cheating, right? You're kind of like, this isn't how cancer treatment's supposed to suck.
Yeah.
And then so you go, and then you have about 5 days off that you can come home or not. We chose not to come home. We were in the there was bad weather and it was hard to get a flight, and we just hung out in Cancun, and then you get your first injection, and it's
injection of what? This is the
Oh well, so then you have what's called an apheresis, which is a process where they draw out your white blood cells, or
they
you get
lots of them.
They need lots of them.
Yeah.
So there's an apheresis that happens. I didn't get one because of the lesion in my brain or in my skull. They couldn't risk raising my blood pressure, so I just had a big blood draw.
Like a regular one from your arm. Okay.
No big deal. And then we went and had another.
You've been taking care of your body before that.
Oh, absolutely.
And, I heard that your white cells were not only really plentiful, but behaved very well, and were.
Well, we had done things, so you helped me get ready to go down there, right? We had an extensive supplemental protocol. I think, I want to say it was something like 30 to 40 pills a day of just boost that immune system and get it just firing on all levels. We had done several rounds of EBOO.
Yep, the EBOO.
We did the EBOO, and I think that, and really, if you think about it, I was only out of radiation 30 days before I went to Mexico. So to have the response that we had, I think is intrinsically linked to the work that we did to just keep that body and that immune system as healthy as possible.
And the decision that you made. various decisions along the way that your immune system heard what you thought.
Well, and belief in the decisions that you've made. You know,
Yeah.
everybody talks about,
Yeah.
oh, you have to think positively. No, you have to be positive, and they are not the same thing. Thinking positive is, I believe something good could happen today. Being positive is something good is happening today.
Yeah.
Not, I'm waiting for it to arrive.
Something coming to you, but
Something
you're making
coming.
it happen.
No,
You're
today is a good day.
Yeah.
I believe today is a good day. I believe in this treatment. And I actually called the treatment in Mexico, I called it my get out of jail free card. Because it was what was going to save me. And I believed that with every fiber of my being.
And all of your cells heard that. But is it a type of jail that you were in?
Cancer?
Yeah.
For
Well,
me it was.
What?
Cancer was for me.
Yeah.
That is how I looked at it, was like, and I'll never forget when I met with my oncologist, Dr. Rubin. I was very upset about having to start the hormone therapy and all that for breast cancer. And I remember she looked at me and she said, Rachel, it's pills, not prison. Right? Because I was, you know me, fairly naturopathic. I didn't want to do those things. I didn't want to tank my hormones. I didn't want to do, but it was necessary to survive. And I think part of that belief of I will survive is also becoming non-biased about your preconceived notions of health. Right? Okay. So when I had cancer the first time, I was like, I am not doing chemo. Period. End of story. I'm not doing it. I am not doing all these hormones and going into menopause at 37 years old. My body needs its estrogen. God designed the body the way that it is. And I had some very strict preconceived notions about what I was and wasn't going to do. And what this journey showed me was, when you focus on the outcome, sometimes the path takes you places you didn't expect.
As you grow.
As you grow, and you have to walk that path. And when I met with Dr. Halpert at Immunoscene, and I asked him about the hormones, and because it can negatively impact the immune system if you don't have the hormones that you should, he explained it to me as, look, cancer is an invading army, and your immune system is your defending army. If you can take food and fuel away from an invader, you always do so. Stopping the estrogen, in my case, takes the fuel away from the cancer. So I made a decision to drop my bias of tamoxifen and hormonal manipulation, because it was like, this is my path to survival. You have brought these doctors in that you trust implicitly. Now listen to what they have to say instead of all of the horror stories that you read on the tamoxifen boards.
That was a big growth.
It's huge growth. To put your preconceived notions aside, no matter what they're about, always takes a lot of personal growth and humility to be in a place that you say, I might have been wrong.
Did you feel like a failure?
I felt not like a failure, because I don't regret what I did, but I felt arrogant.
Looking back? That had I been more willing 5 years ago to try maybe some hormone manipulation, or they did want me to do chemo, I don't know if I would have done that, how that would have turned out. But maybe had I turned the estrogen off 5 years ago, maybe I would not be here today. But I wasn't willing to try. I wasn't willing to experiment. And when she said to me, it's pills, not prison, if you take them and you're miserable, we'll stop taking them and do something else. It was like, why are you sticking your feet in the sand on this issue? And I think sometimes we do that about things. We stick to our guns about our preconceived vaccines are bad. No, unresearched vaccines could possibly be bad, but vaccines as a whole, they're not always bad, right? Do you feel, looking back, like it wasn't just bias, but it was dogma?
Of course.
Yeah, we're met with that a lot in patient care, and there's dogma, and I think it's incumbent upon the physicians to explain things, because people that are coming to us are reading things that we don't know where their sources are.
Absolutely.
And it's incumbent upon the doctors to explain the physiology and the reasoning behind this. And so dogma can be dangerous.
Very. It can be very, very dangerous. And a doctor that will take the time to explain it to you instead of asking you which one of you has the medical degree.
Well, you're hiring the doctors.
You are hiring the doctors. And look, cancer is a life disease. My life will never be the same. I call it the gift I never want again. It's made me a much better human.
I was going to ask that.
It's made me a much better person in a myriad of ways I could talk about for another hour.
We don't, maybe again, because I would like to revisit, but this podcast is a lot about being human, and you said it made you a better human. What does that mean to you?
Kinder, more loving, more compassionate, more present. It just changed me intrinsically, personality-wise. You know, I was always a very alpha, type A, dominating, go get it done, you know, cut the chattel at work, leave the week behind, you know, no special snowflakes, that kind of a person, right? And hard work will get you where you want to be. And while I still believe that that's true, love and compassion will take you further. And
it's a hard lesson for people to learn.
It's a very humbling lesson. Cancer's been very humbling for me. When I got sick the first time, my husband was out of town, and all I knew, I went in for my mammogram, and the radiologist walked in the door and said, "You have cancer and you need a biopsy." So usually you don't get that news until after your biopsy, right? And so I went and picked up my kids from school and was just in complete shock. Right? Like my life just went from being this kind of powerhouse, mid-30s in my prime, to I have cancer and we don't know what kind and we don't know how bad and we don't know any of the things. You just know that you have it. And I remember I had been in a space of kind of ungratefulness at that point. I was very stressed out at work. I was very stressed out at home. You know, we'd been fighting a lot, my husband and I. I wasn't speaking to my mother. You know, we had all of these things. And I remember thinking, reading on Dr. Google, of course, what life was going to look like while I battled cancer. What were my chances of surviving? Was I going to die? You know, all the things that run through your head. And I had this very clear moment where I thought to myself, God, I would give anything to go back to yesterday when I didn't know. And I heard this voice in my head. I assume it's God, but whatever your faith is, that said, then I guess the life that I gave you wasn't so bad, was it? And it was a really humbling moment where I realized I was choosing to see the negative side of things all the time. How hard I was working, how tired I was, how stressed I was, instead of how blessed I was to have two healthy kids that could play soccer that I had to drive them around, right? How blessed I was that I had a good job that allowed me to provide for my family and my children and right, you know, I never saw the positive side of things. And it was like in that moment that I just wished I could go back to that life. It was like, I guess that life was pretty good then, wasn't it?
It's not your fault. I have one more question for you. Are you still on Google and Googling all those things?
So I have certain sources that I read now about up and coming cancer treatments and, you know, reliable sources. I did leave the fenbendazole for cancer groups. I just, only from my own, I got tired of everybody asking how do you dose it and then everybody else saying go into the files and pull the file. And it was just like, I wanted to see success stories or I wanted to see failures. I wanted to see what helped people. In December, we got my first PET scan back that the cancer for me has been reduced by about 85 to 90%. It's a truly miracle. What
was the miracle?
That doesn't happen.
But what part of the journey was that? Was it divine that you were found heal navigator?
I believe there was absolutely divine intervention, that our journey on this planet is always about the journey. We always think it's about the destination, right? My destination was cancer-free, but the divine part was the journey. The losing the preconceived notions, the becoming kinder, the becoming that you do on that journey. I lost my hair. It was incredibly difficult for me, you know, to lose my hair and be bald and, you know, be ugly in today's societal exceptions of beauty, right? Like that was its own journey that we could talk about again, right? Like to lose your sense of identity of who you were to who you've become, to learn how to walk in this world without the everydayness of your confidence of beauty, right? That's really hard. And people, they're like, oh, well, you had cancer, so you lost your hair. You're like, no, you don't understand what that means, right? I looked sick. I was sick. I still don't walk properly, right? And I've had to learn how to continue to become me with losing all of those physical things that I used to depend on.
Well said.
And that makes you I'm a better mom. I'm so much more patient with my kids.
There's lots to come for you.
I mean, and then what if doing this treatment in Mexico, what if it saves somebody else?
Well, probably has. You've talked to several people about it.
Yeah, but I mean, what if somebody sees this podcast? What if somebody sees, a video on immunosine? What if somebody's like, I had my vet called me the other day and was like, hey, I have a stage 4 breast cancer patient that I treat her dog. Can she talk to you? Because I talked to him, right? And so coming out of your shell, which is not easy for me, to just shine the light for somebody else that maybe can't do the research or doesn't even know how to start.
Well, thank you for being here and shining the
Thank
light
you.
on this.
I'm so blessed and happy to be here and to be getting better. I just want to share that with anybody that might need that same motivation that I needed last year. All those people that went online and shared their survivor stories gave me what I needed to find that strength. So if I can be that for somebody else, then my journey was well worth it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Rubin on Point, a podcast about cancer, resilience, and most of all, about being human. I hope today's conversation inspired you to see new possibilities for growth, healing, and strength in your life. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a little extra resilience in their day. Remember, no matter what challenges you're facing, resilience isn't just about bouncing back. It's about building a life of purpose, connection, and vitality. Until next time, stay strong, stay healthy, and take care of yourself and those around you.